Hi, friends. Welcome to the Regenerative Agriculture Podcast, where we have all kinds of fun conversations related to regenerating our ecosystems. That includes regenerating soil health and plant health and livestock health, and ultimately, of course, human health, which is what the ultimate purpose of agriculture really is and should be all about. There are many conversations around growing a variety of different crops that we've had here on the podcast, but there's one conversation that we haven't had very often, and that is related to nut production. I've had a lot of conversations around fruit production, vegetable production, and the foundational principles are all the same. But I'm here today with Dan Brown, who can give us some perspective on growing some different types of tree crops that we haven't talked about before. So, Dan, thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to share your experiences and some of the things you're working on. Tell us a little bit about your context. What are the crops that you're growing? What type of environment? What does your operation look like?
So yes, we farm hazelnuts primarily in the Pacific Northwest, the Willamette Valley of Oregon, of varying ages, and I'm fifth generation on the family farm. We have lots of different varieties of hazelnuts, and this is the primary hazelnut growing region in the country. 99% of hazelnuts are grown within about 60 miles of me, about 10 miles north, about 50 miles south, and 10 miles east and west. It's very, very small microclimate.
From a food security perspective, what's going to happen when you get a deep freeze one winter and then a hot summer that summer?
We hope that doesn't happen. It has. Back, I believe in '89, there was a almost crop failure, and then, but hazelnuts are not hugely consumed domestically either, so
That's true.
They're relatively unknown.
Which parts of the world are hazelnuts consumed very well? Does that mean that the majority of your crop goes to an export market?
It does, although a lot of it is exported and then re-imported into Nutella. That's the primary consumption of Americans of hazelnuts, but as far as direct consumption, Europe, Germany is a huge consumer, and other parts of Europe. China was a big market as well for a while, and they've kind of pulled back.
Given the recent change in administration with the election, do you foresee any possibilities of some of that re-importation or that exported processing and manufacturing being brought domestically into the country, or not particularly?
I don't know if that will necessarily benefit us directly. It's hard to say. I mean, it's very fluid at this point.
It's premature to speculate at this point. Tell us a little bit about your operation. You said that you're the fifth generation, still farming with your family. What is the scale of production, and what other crops are you growing in addition to the hazelnuts?
So yes, I farm with my family. Dad's still heavily involved, and my brother as well. We farm hazelnuts, a few walnuts. We used to farm quite a few walnuts, but that market has collapsed. And then we also farm some corn, wheat, clover for seed. We experimented with peas this year. That was a bit of a failure, but we'll try again. Some oats for grain. In the Willamette Valley, there are about 200 different crops grown, so you can grow anything you can imagine.
Pretty awesome microclimate, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with the Willamette Valley microclimate, can you give us some perspective on your rainfall environment and what your growing conditions look like?
Yes. So it's a Mediterranean type climate, so we get most of our moisture and precipitation in the fall, winter, and early spring, and then the summer is really almost desert-like. Of some years the rain turns off early May and we don't see a drop of rain until September, but we can also get upwards of 30 to 50 inches of rain in the off season.
And does that mean that you're then generally irrigating during the summer months? Most of the crop production is irrigated?
So we have both. Hazelnuts traditionally have been dryland, but irrigation has been adopted much more so in recent years on a lot of the newer plantings, because the industry had a influx boom 10 years ago when the price tripled basically overnight, and the acreage also tripled in about 5 years subsequently, and then pricing has fallen and then since recovered somewhat to a much better level. So that's that part of it. But a lot of crops in our area are cool season grasses, which grow primarily in the fall, winter, spring, and so irrigation is not required. Yeah, winter wheat in our area can be 150 bushel dryland.
Intriguing. so that it's able to tap into the moisture. Yeah, well, you have the cool season, growing season as well. Yeah, so how has your farming operation evolved over the last 5 to 10 years? What are the things that you're working on improving? I know that several people recommend that I have a conversation with you based on some of the innovative things that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about those.
So we were having some significant struggles and challenges in our orchards, and related to compaction, soil loss via erosion and things. So we went down the rabbit hole of how can we address this and try to fix and mitigate, and tried some really crazy things to see what happens. I mean, you think of a tree is supposed to have roots out to a strip line. So I took a subsoiler down a row, very small test, just because I didn't want to totally kill everything, and found very minimal rooting. And so that was more confirmation that the roots really aren't there because of extreme compaction. I can take a soil penetrometer and I can peg to 1,000 at the surface.
At the surface?
At the surface.
Wow. And so when did you try this experiment with the deep ripping?
That was about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago.
And what have you done since then?
We've done some cover cropping. We've tried to stay out of the orchards when it's too wet as much as possible. We've kind of changed from a traditional bare orchard floor to, even if it's just the native weed cover, letting a lot of that grow, at least in the drive rows, to both mitigate compaction and help alleviate some and break some of it up, as well as it helps hugely with erosion.
And to offer some context for people who aren't familiar with hazelnut production, how thorough is the shade cover on the orchard floor? Of course, it varies with maturity as well, how mature the trees are. But for a mature orchard, what proportion of the orchard floor is covered in shade during the day?
In the summertime, a mature orchard can be basically fully shaded.
And what does that translate to in terms of cover crop growth underneath the orchard canopy?
That was actually a little surprising. I planted a mix of oats and peas one year and was able to, we had some 4-foot tall oats in the orchard, even through full canopy, no sunlight, no direct sunlight.
That's intriguing.
Yeah, it was, a lot of people were really surprised how much, I was too, really.
And I understand that in almonds, the reason for the bare orchard floor, of course, is to facilitate harvest. Is that the same purpose, the same intention in hazelnut production as well?
That is correct.
So how have you been managing that cover crop residue for harvest?
We flail mow quite a few times through the year, and that generally, if we don't get behind on it, takes care of it and does a good job. If we do get behind, we've had some challenges of grass residue. This year we actually bailed a little bit just to get rid of it, but it's all learning.
So in addition to the cover crops, have you also been doing any subsoiling for compaction?
After that first experiment, we haven't yet. I'd like to try an inline ripper just to minimize the surface blowout, to try to not cause so many problems, because it was a full reset, and so harvest that year was virtually impossible.
When you say a full reset, are you saying that you did things in addition to the ripping as well?
So yeah, I ripped it in August, which is about a month and a half prior to harvest. And in doing so, I brought up basketball-sized boulders of soil that I then had to break back down into some semblance of soft, and then it got a little bit wet and just was a muddy mess of not good.
So what are the things have you been trying and working on?
We've got some subsurface drip irrigation that we're big fans of that. It's much more easy to manage than surface drip. And then with that, we do some fertigation. We like foliar feeding. It's direct, it's quick, it's efficient with volumes of product, and doesn't necessarily have the microbial degradation associated with some of the salty fertilizer type products that you would soil apply.
Have you been, I'm assuming with the hazelnut production and the production of some of the higher value crops, you've been foliar feeding kind of steadily over the years. It's not particularly a new innovation for you.
Correct.
But how has your nutrition management evolved over the last couple of years?
We have brought in sap analysis through Crop Health, which is through AEA, and Dad was actually an early adopter of foliar feeding, probably close to 20 years ago in the tree nuts, and we've since continued and refined over the years. And then with sap analysis, that's really targeted even more and brought nutrients into the picture that were never thought of in the past.
I find it intriguing that still, I still to this day, sometimes people reach out and say, oh, foliar applications are invalid and they are not scientific and they have no scientific basis. Foliar applications don't work. Plants only absorb nutrients through the leaves. I'm like, where have you been for the last 40 years? And where are you getting your information?
Yeah.
Like we have the International Plant Nutrient Institute publishing articles and some outstanding reference materials and resources on how to design effective foliar applications. Like this is not a new idea or an idea that is just getting started. Yeah. So coming back to your sap analysis, what did the sap analysis results reveal, and how did that change your nutrition management?
We've seen lots of different things. We found low molybdenum and cobalt in those, and have since added those into our programs. Potassium, we've been able to pull back on some different times of year. Calcium, we always struggled with trying to get levels up. Still trying to dial that one in. Nitrogen levels we've pulled back, and that's also timing based. Another kind of progression of ours over the years was we would traditionally pull soil tests in August, and I'd get the results back, and there's 150 units of nitrogen in the soil left at the end of the year. I'm like, this seems silly. We put it on, the tree never takes it up, and then it gets flushed in the wintertime, and it's gone. So we've since really pulled back on soil applied nitrogen. Traditional application rates are as high as 160 units is kind of the recommendation from the college, and we've pulled that way down to sub 50.
So you've cut it down to about 35% of where you were.
Correct, yes.
And there's an important question that I missed asking when we're talking about your use of cover crops and how that has changed. How did the soil compaction change as a result of that? Do you have less compaction now than what you did have?
We've found some, but we're still fighting that and trying to alleviate that. Still looking for, I wouldn't say the magic bullet, but I mean we're open to trying anything and everything to try to help with that. Cover cropping certainly has helped, but it's challenging still.
Yeah, my reason for asking about the soil compaction was you mentioned previously that you had still as much as 150 units of nitrogen left in the soil at the end of the season, and you were only applying 150 to 160 units. So are you thinking that you had very limited absorption because of soil compaction?
That's possible, and I think also they've done uptake tests on hazelnuts and found that they only actually need about half of that total season growing long anyways, as well as traditional organic matter levels in a lot of hazelnut orchards are 3 to 5%, and if you get 20 to 25 units per percent there, so it's just through microbial processing over the year, I think it was just basically wasted.
So with where you are right now with 50 units of nitrogen application, how are the trees responding to that reduced nitrogen application?
We've had some very, very good yields. We've had our challenges as well, but not necessarily related to that. Some possible, and we're still dialing it in. We will foliar feed with urea and some amino nitrogen products through the year, and next year we'll probably step that up some to really try to dial in the right levels throughout the whole growing season. We were labor challenged the last couple of years due to very low crop pricing, and that's one downside to foliar feeding is the acres per day is much lower than dry bulk spread.
Yeah. So, in addition to nitrogen management, what other nutrient changes did you see taking place?
We're always trying to address boron. Hazelnuts like boron, and we have low soil boron levels, even in the parent rock material. So we'll put on as much as 3 actual pounds of boron in a band. So, like if you took it as a broadcast rate, it's almost 6 pounds in the tree row, which most people think you're crazy for. But the trees, we didn't yet to see any boron toxicity symptoms. And again, you pull a soil test at the end of the season, and it's back down to a half ppm level. So the tree had to.
That's intriguing. Absorb some of it, and who knows, some of it may have gotten sequestered in some of the organic
Yeah.
matter. It may not be showing up on the test. It's not
possible.
there anymore. With the changes in boron management, nitrogen management, the various things that you've done, how has crop performance shifted? Are you getting yields equivalent to what you've got in the past? What do yields and quality look like?
We've had yields equal to, some higher than. In our really local, we have shallower soils, so 20 miles south of us, they just kind of automatically get a higher yield than we do because they have 30 feet of topsoil versus 6 to 12 inches. So our soil, we farm in some hilly areas where there just isn't as deep of native topsoil. Then you hit clay and silt is the kind of what you run into below there. Very red, it's jori type soil. It grows wine grapes very well. It's a very common crop in the very localized area. But yeah, back to yields. We've been pleased and happy. We've had yield increases, and through changing management, last year we had some very good yields. This year we're still waiting on some final numbers, but we've been very pleased.
What have been some of the highlights or the memorable moments? What are some of the things that really stand out to you that were perhaps surprise or unexpected?
We pulled a total nutrient digestion on some fields last spring, and it was very eye-opening to see just the amount of like potassium and organic nitrogens and all these minerals that we're always taught, oh, you got to keep adding, you got to keep adding, you got to keep adding. And well, no, we need to unlock what's there and use what's there, not just pour on hundreds and hundreds of dollars an acre every year because somebody said it's a good idea, even though we've shown and seen that there's really no economic benefit to us. There is to the retailer.
Well, ultimately, yeah, it's interesting to bring economic benefit to the retailer, but you need to bring it to yourself as well. How do we do that?
That's the magic. The magic right there is try to find high ROI inputs and unlock the native cycling of nutrients via soil biology and those types of things.
What are the experiences that you've had that you believe other farmers would benefit from knowing about? What have you learned that you wish you knew several years ago?
Don't be afraid to try something new. That would be a big one. Just even if it's on a small amount of your acreage, try some crazy ideas and see what happens. That's how we learn. I mean, do I mess up and fail? Absolutely. I look at that as that's learning. We learn more from our failures than our successes.
You know, there's this interesting pattern that occurs when you look at the trajectory of people's lives. Early on in life, we encourage failure. Like we encourage toddlers to figure out how to walk, and when they fall down, we celebrate it. Hey, it was awesome, you did great. And same with learning how to ride a bike and all kinds of athletic endeavors through your childhood years and formative years. And then the older you get, and particularly once you go to school and with our educational system, failure becomes criminalized. And rather than celebrating failures, we get to the point where by the time we're adults, we want to avoid making mistakes. And when the reality is we should consider mistakes as a part of training, and we want to make as many of them as rapidly as possible. Not unintentionally, of course.
Yeah.
What were some of the mistakes that you've made, or you encourage people to take risks? What have been some of the risks that you have taken that you would encourage other people to experiment with and to play with?
Cover cropping, and we've had successes with that and some struggles. One definite struggle was we planted radish that was very aggressive, both top growth and tuber. And so come harvest season, we had 3 foot tall radish top plant, and that was an epic problem of trying to harvest. And it with the harvest equipment would pull the whole tuber out of the ground, so it's trying to run a 3-pound radish through the nut harvester that's not meant for this.
Yeah, nut harvester's meant for something about the size of a dime or a quarter, not a...
Yeah. But other successes through cover cropping have been just significant reduction in soil erosion. We've had we used to manage our orchard floors with bare soil. Just pretty much we would spray in the spring, pre-emergent herbicide, clear across, mow, drag to just basically a tabletop bare dirt surface, and have since really gone away from that. We still keep the tree rows pretty clean because it's hard to get the nuts out of the tree row if there's too much vegetation there, but we manage a mowed center via either just native weed cover or planted cover crops. We want to hopefully next spring put in some creeping red fescue as a grass and a nice grass cover we'll just mow 4, 5, 6 times a year. And we found flail mowing, we can mow as fast as 8 miles an hour and cover a lot of acres in a hurry. So it's really not a huge cost that used to be thought of as being very expensive to mow versus chemical mowing.
You mentioned the various cover crops that you've tried, the radishes and the oats earlier. What time of year are those going in the ground? Are they during the dormant season, or as in post-harvest, or are they going in during the summer months?
We would typically will plant post-harvest or early spring if it gets too wet before we've gotten a chance to plant them or too cold to germinate.
So in the post-harvest period, if you're planting cover crops in the post-harvest, then that would be the period when you have abundant rainfall and you also don't have a tree canopy. So is there some level of growth that continues all the way during the winter months?
Yes, and I mean it's slow, but even in the winter we're not super cold. It's common. There's a lot of 50-degree days, so cool season grasses will grow and tiller and other things will grow as well slowly, and then in the spring when we get some more heat units, stuff really takes off. But yeah, it's as long as we can get them in before just temperatures get too cold to germinate seed.
I don't have a lot of personal experience with hazelnuts, and I'm really curious about how your experience and what you're describing is different from that of other growers or from the hazelnut industry as a whole. What are some of the challenges that the industry is dealing with or is struggling with?
Challenges the industry struggles with of the last couple of years, biggest thing's been low price. As good as corn was 2 years ago, hazelnuts were that much bad and worse. It was record low pricing by I don't even know how many orders of magnitude. But since that's now recovering, that will help a lot. Other industry issues, soil erosion's a big problem. I was just chatting with a grower the other day who was asking me about if I'd ever tried subsoiling in an orchard, and I said I had, but there's definite challenge that can come with it. I'd like to try an inline ripper in an orchard that's a minimum disturbance to just try to shatter some compaction layers deeper, but not just obliterate the soil surface. That's something I want to try in the future.
I know several years ago, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe longer than that, I was visiting with a group of hazelnut growers, and they were having major concerns and reservations around filbert blight, eastern filbert blight. Is that still a challenge to the same degree that it has been historically?
It is, and so it's actually an interesting you bring that up in that the college has bred new varieties that were highly resistant to the eastern filbert blight, and then just this spring of 24 it's been found to have mutated into a new blight strain that affects hazelnuts again. So that's kind of what we thought was no longer an issue has come full circle, not surprisingly, honestly.
No, not surprisingly at all.
Yeah, that's the way nature works. We have taken a different approach. The college is recommending 4 fungicide treatments in the spring, and we're really going after it through a nutrition management practice. Just try to keep trees healthier, and really, it's just like you and I have an immune system. So does a plant and a tree. They can fight it off if they're healthy as well. Is our philosophy anyway.
And how's that been working out for you? I don't know, how long have you been trying that or playing with it?
We've been playing with it for about 3 years now. It's hard to know for sure the success on the blight directly because it's like a 18 to 20 month latency period. So what you do this year, you really don't necessarily know for a couple of years, as well as the spread of blight is on the new varieties anyway. It's kind of localized, and so we haven't seen it in our area on really anybody's trees. So, but on the same, we figure if the trees are healthier, we'll have higher yields anyways. So it's an economic benefit there. And then if we do start to see it, we'll just monitor that and try other nutrient approaches with some more intensive things and go that trajectory.
Are you saying that it's premature to have any results yet? Do you have any initial observations that you've observed, or not really at this point?
Not really at this point. I mean, we've seen tree health is good, but also in the orchards that we've been trying the nutrition management to manage blight longer, the blight was already in them very, very significantly, and if we were to prune it out entirely, the tree would be completely gone. So we had to pick a level of acceptable, but we're excited about this process of managing disease through nutrition versus synthetic chemistry, because we have had success in insect pressure via nutrition management. I have orchards that traditionally it's 1 to 2 insecticide sprays in the summer for filbert moth, that we haven't sprayed insecticide on in 3-4 years and haven't had insect problems at all. So that's a happy success we found there.
Yeah, it is interesting that we have a lot of experience working with nutrition management for disease and insect control, and often there's kind of, this is for me, I don't know what the subconscious programming is in my head that results in this, but there is kind of this subconscious expectation that, if you balance nutrition management, then it should be between diseases and insects. The diseases should be the easiest to control, right? Because insects are mobile, they can move around, they can bounce around, but it should be easier to control insects. But it's been a common experience that the insects are faster to respond to nutrition management than the diseases. You get more immediate results.
I think, we've seen the same in our experience.
You mentioned that you are working with foliar feeding and you want to change some of your nitrogen to do more amino acid and urea foliar applications. How common is foliar feeding in hazelnut production?
It's fairly adopted. It's fairly common. Definitely not ubiquitously used by everyone, but it is fairly common. But we're probably on a higher intensity level. Some people, it's more of I'm already making a pass across for a insecticide or fungicide treatment, so I'll throw something in the tank with it, versus we're much more, our primary objective is a foliar nutrition that's directed by a lot of sap analysis through that, and we have some crazy tank mixes. We'll have 15 different products in a tank at one time.
Whoa.
Most people think I'm nuts.
Yeah, that's quite a combination.
Yeah.
What are the things that you would like to try in the future? What are the things that you want to continue experimenting with? Where do you think the opportunities are?
I think the opportunities are, honestly endless. if you look at the yield potential of a hazelnut, we're at probably 10%. So there's a lot of room to, yeah. If you go out in the winter, spring when they're in bloom, and you count all the blossoms and a number of nuts that could be there, and extrapolate it out versus what we harvest, it's very limited.
Where does most of that loss happen? Is it a lack of pollination? Is it fruit drop or nut drop rather?
I believe it's abortions throughout the season. A lot of it's earlier on, just via there's nutrient deficiencies or stressors from environmental things, and then there is a certain level of the tree can only support so much weight that definitely would challenge if you try to get too much. You could just break the tree in half. But there's a lot of room for improvement in yields.
Well, that sounds exciting to me because when you have a plant that expresses itself in that way genetically, then producing nice yield responses is usually not difficult with good nutrition management. You can get some nice yield responses in that way.
Yeah, that's exciting for us too.
Yeah. How do you see the hazelnut industry evolving generally? What does the future look like?
I hope to encourage other growers to try the regenerative ag approach. I've had some conversations with some. Some are receptive, some are reticent, but I believe this is the future of agriculture. It's encouraging to be asked. That means they have a problem or a question that something makes them scratch their head of why is this way or why not. So I like to encourage trying new ideas, and this is the path we're on, and we're excited to continue with it.
What would you like to bring forward that I've missed asking you about? What are important topics for us to still talk about?
Important topics would be, there's hazelnuts. We haven't really touched on any of our other cropping.
Yep.
We could go that direction, or any other hazelnut questions, I'm happy to.
What other crops have you had really memorable experiences on, or things that you've been trying that really have caught your attention?
So we're very new to growing grain corn. This is only our second year, but we have grown some high 200 to probably 300 bushel corn on sub 100 unit nitrogen.
That sounds fun.
Pretty exciting.
Now, if I were a cynic from the Midwest, I would say, but yeah, you're doing that on 3 to 5% organic matter soil. Is that irrigated?
It is irrigated, although this year we irrigated one time.
Okay.
We got a couple summer rains, which was very helpful, but we're actually thinking we can grow some dryland corn. Much lower yield potential, but even still, there is opportunity there.
So how did you manage nitrogen to produce that proportion of crop? Was there nitrogen coming from any other sources, from cover crops, from manure, any other types of applications?
There wasn't. That was a hay field that was very tired from about 10 years that we turned under and planted it to corn and put down very limited nitrogen, and it put out a very nice corn crop.
Did you run any soil analysis? How much nitrogen was in the soil and from the hay residue?
There was some organic nitrogen. Nitrate levels were very low. I don't remember the exact numbers offhand, but it was definitely not hundreds. It was 5 or 10 units of nitrogen.
And what form of nitrogen did you apply? How did you manage that?
We used both some dry urea as well as Sea Shield amino product, and that year we did not do any foliar nitrogen, so it was just there was Sea Shield with the planter.
So you're running roughly 1/3 of a pound of nitrogen per bushel of corn, which is some of the most efficient that I've heard of, and that's of course, yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the total contribution from the soil looked like, not just of nitrate, but of the total organic nitrogen.
And we ran a Haney test, and it was pretty microbial active. It had a good score, so that was certainly a contributor. But
yeah. I'd
rather have it fix its own versus buying it.
What other experiences have stood out for you as being memorable with your other crops? You said that I think at the beginning of the conversation, you said that you tried peas this last year and that did not turn out as you had hoped.
Nope. So peas was a experiment for us this year. They'd be dry combine peas for seed. And the challenge there, we don't. So they're traditionally swathed and then combine with a pickup header. We didn't have a swather at the time, so we were going to direct combine them. But it had rained, so the biomass was just flat on the ground, meaning like less than an inch. So we tried crop lifters on the combine, but it also wasn't, having never grown these before, didn't know how firm and smooth that you need to have a seed bed for being able to do that. So we were putting as much dirt in the combine as seed, so we decided this is not going to work. So we just flailed them all off and disted under, and then now it's a volunteer pea crop, and we're going to try and overwinter those, and hopefully they don't freeze kill. We'll see. But right now it's a very, very lush field of peas.
Well, give them a good dose of boron. That'll help them to not freeze kill. Maybe you already have done that.
We haven't, but that's good to know.
Yeah, we had an interesting experience this fall that I actually want to go over and check on it again now. It's been a couple of weeks since I looked at it, but about 4 miles from where I'm sitting at the moment, we planted a diverse mixture of cover crop seed that we got from Green Cover Seed, and saw that we were putting into a cover crop for the first time after coming out of mainstream corn soybean production for the last 20 years, and the intent is to spend a couple years in cover crops to try to regenerate the soil and then go into an orchard system. So we planted these cover crops. The seed emerged in mid to late August. I think it was last week in August before you could see the seed, just because of how dry it was here. And at planting, we had broadcasts some gypsum and some poultry litter and a very hefty dose of boron, 3 pounds per acre of actual boron, or what would be considered a high dose here in this part of the world. And the cover crop mix included a number. It was originally intended to be planted at the beginning of June, but we didn't get into the ground because there was no moisture. It would not have germinated. And so we sat on the seed for some period before we got it planted. And as a result of that, the mix included summer annuals like buckwheat and sunflower and phacelia and similar types of cover crops. And when I looked at it here roughly 2 weeks ago, maybe it's less than that, maybe a week or so ago, at the point where I looked at it, we had experienced 3 hard killing frosts, like low 20s temperatures, low to mid 20s, and had not touched the summer annuals like this. I've got photos of the buckwheat still blooming, and the phacelia is still just as green and vibrant as can be. It's only maybe 8 to 10 inches tall or something like that, but had been completely unfazed by the hard freeze, the killing frost that we had got. So given what little I know about boron's contribution to creating a gel-like state in the cell and avoiding cellular damage from freezing temperatures and the high sugar content that it can contribute to, I'm kind of giving the boron the credit for that, because certainly we've done lots of gypsum applications over the years and lots of pelletized poultry litter applications over the years, and I've never seen a response quite like that. But it's the first time I've put on such a high dose of boron at that particular stage. So something we learned. I'm going to be trying to replicate it, that's for sure.
Yeah, excellent. Be happy to hear what happened with that.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for being here, for being willing to share your experiences and your wisdom. And thank you for the great work that you're doing. And I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future.
Excellent. Thank you.
The team at AEA and I are dedicated to bringing this show to you because we believe that knowledge and information is the foundation of successful regenerative systems. At AEA, we believe that growing better quality food and making more money from your crops is possible. And since 2006, we've worked with leading professional growers to help them do just that. At AEA, we don't guess, we test, we analyze, and we provide recommendations based on scientific data, knowledge, and experience. We've developed products that are uniquely positioned to help growers make more money with regenerative agriculture. If you are a professional grower who believes in testing instead of guessing, someone who believes in a better, more regenerative way to grow, visit advancingecoag.com and contact us to see if AEA is right for you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to working with you.